Okay, we'll talk about that in just a second. Hello and welcome to a special Unsourced Wall broadcast. We're taking a look at the Matrix Trilogy in preparation for the Matrix Resurrections that comes out in like, what, 2 days? I can't believe it. But let's just introduce ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Elvis. It's my first live stream, so I'm really excited. But let's introduce, how about you talk about yourself for a little bit, Mikhail?
Um, Hello, I'm Mikhail or MLS 532. I like to think of myself as a cultural writer. I like writing about film, television, new media, and I'm a huge fan of The Matrix, have been for years, and I'm currently writing about The Matrix on both Substack and hopefully something for Medium. We'll see how that goes.
All right, and how about you, AJ? You go next.
Yeah, I'm AJ. I have done a we I do a podcast with Elvis and another gentleman who will be joining us shortly. Also been a big fan of The Matrix for, years. It changed filmmaking and excited to talk about it this evening before the new film.
Awesome. Yes. So we had like a little bit of agenda planned. Now we are waiting on Ro, our other cohort and co-host from Comics Code UH-thority, who should be joining us in just a minute. But while we wait on that, let's just get started with our little bit of an agenda here. So let's start off with talking about the first movie. The originator, The Matrix, 1999. Like over 20 years at this point. That's insane to think about it. Okay, like I guess we can start like what are our general first impressions, our first experience with this movie, and just like what we thought about it, like at the time and maybe even now. Let's let AJ go first here because I think we already have a lot to say about it ourselves, Mikhail.
Yeah, sure. So 99, I was just turning 10 years old. I think when the film came out, I begged my parents to take me to go see it. They wouldn't at the time, but I had an aunt, and she ended up taking me and didn't tell my parents, and I was just so thankful for that. I mean it. I mean, I'm a kid, so I was a kid at the time. It doesn't take much to blow my mind, but it literally blew my mind. I think as I've gotten older and done rewatches over the years, I pick up on so much more that I didn't realize back then. But just that was probably the first time I've been introduced to the concept of AI and the potential pitfalls that could come from that. And it was just the film itself was just it was. I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this. It made me look at things deeper, I guess, over the years and our understanding of our place in the world, how we go about our day-to-day lives, and does anything we really do matter. So, The Matrix has been a film. I guess I learn something new every time I watch it. I'll put it that way, but it's definitely been something that's changed my how I view filmmaking in general, but also the world in which we occupy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now me and Mikhail talked about this a little bit like off the chat. So I guess I'll go now because I think like I have like the least to say about this first one. It's not the one that like I am more familiar with, just in terms of like most experience with it. Because I think I'm pretty sure I'm like the young dude in experience with this movie. Because when it came out, I was like 4 or 5. I didn't really see it until like after the trilogy had kind of ended.
Mm,
And that my first experience with The Matrix was during those primetime movie of the week kind of things, like on UPN or like ABC or like Fox, um, where they'd be like, okay, The Matrix is on 8:30, whatever, like, and that's how I watched a lot of movies. That's how I watched like Star Wars for the first time. That's how I watched like something like John Borman's Excalibur for the first time, just because it was on.
right.
It was just on, and I really enjoyed it. Like I think at that time, like The Matrix had already become so ubiquitous, that it's hard to remember like not knowing about The Matrix. Like you saw it on cartoons, you saw it like in other movies, and I had known a lot about the visual sort of like currency of the Matrix well before actually seeing it. But I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was like it makes an impression. It does, even as a little kid. It is very enigmatic. Like you don't forget about it. How about you, Mikhail?
My experience with the Matrix, it's I did not discover it on cable. I went to see it in theaters, and I think if I recall correctly, my brother was the one who saw it first, and he was kind of raving about it, but he didn't really tell me or my parents like what it was about. And then, we went to see it in theaters, and it was like one of those experiences where, you don't really know anything about the movie except that some people say that it's good. And so it was kind of revelatory. It was, it was mind blowing, really. And I remember how later in '99, I think we got we got the DVD release, and the DVD was kind of awesome. I mean, it was. I think it's considered kind of groundbreaking for its time. It had all these DVD-ROM features and like Follow the White Rabbit and everything. And the presentation of the movie was really good, although I heard later that apparently the colors weren't really all that great. But, the movie was just like, that kind of made it appointment viewing, in the home. Like we would watch it, I think for the first 6 months after we got the DVD, we were like watching it together maybe every couple of weeks or something. So, and you always we repeat it, like you discover new things about it every time you see it. So that led me to become a huge fan of it. And, I was really, I was really excited by that. And it kind of, kind of stayed with me, and I was, I would continue, I would watch all the sequels and get into a lot of the other media with it, and I still think about the movie today, and I'm quite impressed every time I see it again.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now I want to bring this up because, like I said, there's two things that I find really funny with my first experience with the Matrix. In that, of course, we all know about the movie parodies. Like everyone knows, the Scary Movie I think was like the one one of the more kind of infamous ones, which was it had a really funny like, oh my back, you got whatever. It's hilarious. But two that I think were like the ones that I'd seen well before the Matrix. That that made more sense after seeing the Matrix were these two. Let me see. Let me see if I can find the picture here. Okay, that's this one. So there was this parody episode of Codename Kid Next Door that parodied the second Renaissance segment from 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 the Animatrix, and like I had I didn't even know that Matrix existed. And I knew the Matrix existed, and this was around the time like the sequel was coming out. But the fact like the last when I actually got around to like delving into the franchise, it was a shock. Like wow, this is a deep cut. This is a deep cut, and I was, and it's an exacting parody where like the robots are machines are adults and children created adults, and they made everyone forget and all that kind of stuff. It's um, and school is like the pod system. It's ridiculous, but really funny. And the other one would have to be, have you guys ever heard of Train Man? Not the Train Man from the Matrix Revolutions. Let me show you this. It is a Japanese movie about based on the this viral like meme on 2chan way back in the day, and I'm not quite sure if this is something that existed alongside the actual sort of forum threads that were eventually compiled into a book. But in the movie, a big crux of it is that he wants to ask this woman out on a date to go see the Matrix, and there's lots of scenes spent of him trying to explain the plot of it, not making it sound geeky. And like, again, this is all stuff that I saw well before the Matrix. It was even on my radar.
I think I did see I think it was mentioned actually in maybe one of the bonus materials on the DVD releases. I think maybe when they re-released the first movie with The Matrix Revisited in the early 2000s. I think like this film actually came up in one of those in like one of the documentaries there, but I'm not sure if that's if I could be misremembering it.
No, I always thought it was funny because, like, do you think that was an influence on the Train Man program?
Oh, it could very well be. I mean, I think the like the I mean, I think like the name is there, and it's well known that the Wachowskis were. I think they kind of kept track of the fan base because like I think like the early uh like because I think like the fan base was very it grew very quickly. Like I think they were called the Followers or something. Like there was a whole featurette about them, and it could be that they were, and I think like they're like they listened in a way to maybe what the fans were talking about, and yeah, so I think this could very well be an influence. Like I mean, the although I haven't really seen the film, so I don't know if like if there's any like I don't know any plot references like in Revolutions or anything to the film.
I've been seeing it since like middle school, because I had known about the story well before then, so it was really a shock when I'm like in middle school, like I'm like 11, 12, and the substitute of the day is like, let's just watch the movie. I'm bored, and like no one else knows what's going on. I'm like, this is Train Man. This is the Train Man story. Like, because at that point I was already like well into like antisocial forums, so I was cool. um, but yeah, so those are really like my experiences, like the original movie. And as a movie, I think it's like, let's talk about the quality of it. Just in general, like story wise, I know that you have a lot to say. That it's very well self-contained. It is like the most kind of like standard kind of story you can make, but it's told with an insane amount of elegance. Like
Mm.
there's no fat to it. It's all well structured. Like everything leads to. There's no wasted scenes.
Like I think that's absolutely true. Just looking back at it, I'm kind of surprised whenever I watch it now, and it's like the amount of plot in a way, or the amount of potential story that they cram into the movie. It's like, well, I think it's almost like three movies worth of plot, but it's also presented in such a way that it's very economical. So in a way, all of the subplots that they have, all of the little corners of the world that they explore, you feel like they give them just enough scenes, just enough running time, enough breathing room, to really matter without seeming like it's either underutilized or if it's excessive or anything. Um, and it's really quite fascinating. Like a lot of films nowadays, I feel, it's like if they try to make it today, I think maybe maybe like the first half of this would be the entire film, and then the second half could be like a whole other film in and of all by itself.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one thing that really shocks me every time I watch is that how much of it takes its time to even get to like the more spectacular stuff by today's standards. Because like of course like the first half and all that kind of stuff. There's lots of visual like technological aspects that are kind of innovative, but by today's standards, it really is very sort of like it sets up a lot more than it does go over top or like extreme or very action filled. Like there's less action than you would expect from a movie of this kind of reputation, going by, like I said, like by the blockbusters of today. Like it's not like something where there's like an action scene like every 10 minutes like on the clock. It's like there's so much time just set up like with dialogue and discussion and just character interaction, which is why I always thought it was kind of weird when people call like this movie and the sex movies like more cold character wise. Like I don't understand it. I never understood it. Like even now, like there's so much like nuance in the writing, and
Mm.
sometimes not even nuance. Sometimes just overtness, bluntness, but like it's a welcome bluntness in the writing that like no, it lays its emotional cards on the table, and that helps carry the movie through, even though like you're spending like 30 minutes in a grungy like warehouse looking spaceships or whatever. You know, like it's enough to keep you invested.
I mean, I
Yeah,
think
definitely.
No,
I
go ahead,
don't
AJ.
think. What's that?
Go ahead, AJ. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying. It's a. I did my rewatch recently, and I was kind of struck by how heavy the exposition was. It's a lot of it in the film. Maybe even a little more so than you remember if you haven't seen it in a while. But it works. Nothing feels like, hey, it's dragging out, or can we get to the next plot point? Can I get to the next action scene? No, it's all done really well. I agree with both of you. I don't think it could happen today. We're in such a popcorn, give it to me now society that I really don't know how it would work. It's going to be interesting to see what the film this week does, Resurrections does. But I wonder how much of that DNA they'll be able to keep, 20 plus years later.
I mean, I think that's a good point. I haven't actually thought about it, but indeed, usually, like, I think like the first hour of the movie, or maybe not the first hour, more like the first 30 or something minutes, it very much plays like a thriller. Like, there isn't really a lot of action. It's just very kind of, there's like, I think some thriller stuff and some horror elements, like the scene in the interrogation room and stuff, but it doesn't really become an action movie until the second half of it. And they kind of, I mean, you have the opening scene with Trinity, where there was all the running and the jumping over the rooftops, but it doesn't really give you a big set piece until like way later into the running time, and so there's kind of a gradual build up towards that.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of that is that I think I'm going to say I think that the last act, like the Morpheus rescue, is something that really colors like not only this movie but the perception of this movie throughout the years. Because like you said, like it's a lot of running, and I think the closest thing to an action scene until the Morpheus rescue or until like the raid, when Morpheus gets captured, is the dojo fight. But like that's not really like an action scene as we would understand. It's like it's more, again, it's just like a character beat set piece, you know? It's just to show like their personalities, their ideologies, their mindsets, and how they clash and how they intertwine, more so than like look how cool it is that they're fighting. Like the dialogue of that scene is what really like the intensely entertaining part of it. Like the whole, is that air you think you're breathing right now? That's the punchline in that entire scene, where like they're just doing all these like intense, like over the top martial arts moves. Like that's the thing you're actually watching that scene for, more so than like them like hitting each other.
I mean, I definitely think that. I mean, I think like that's a great point. Like about the dojo scene. Although I think at the same time, almost every action scene in the movie has it has that emphasis on character. Like I find, how they sort of space out like the punches and the hits, and even like the sometimes like the shooting. There are these moments where the characters interact, like when Smith like fights Neo. They have all of these bouts in between I mean, they have like all of these verbal bouts in between the physical bouts. And it builds character, and it often advances character. So to me, like, when you see Smith and Neo fight, for example, a lot of it is, showing like Neo's belief progressing, his belief in himself. For example, so it's a pretty like it's an amazing visceral fight, but you also have that character progression in there, and even in some of the larger pieces, it's also like I feel they're very they find ways to keep linking that to character, like like the whole helicopter. The helicopter drops, for example. There's this big explosion, and like all the windows are like flying out from the sound and stuff. But then there's that beat right afterwards where Morpheus is like, he just kind of comes out of there, like he reunites with Trinity and Neo, and he's like, "Do you see it now? Do you believe it? He's the one," or something like that.
Yeah, no, that again, that's great, and I totally agree. Yes, that there is this conscious effort to make sure that not every action isn't solely just an action scene, and I think that's what we're getting to when we reach the next movie. Um, in particular in terms of contrasting like why that works here. And but I do want to mention one more thing, like the romance. Now, this is something that this movie in particular has always gotten the short shrift of, criticism wise. Like people always like it makes no sense. It's not believable. They have no chemistry. It's not written well. So I want to hear what you guys' thoughts are. Like, do you think like the romance between Neo and Trinity is actually something that's like well earned?
I mean, I think that's a great question, but like to me, it always worked. And honestly, I've never really read like any reviews. I'm surprised to hear that there were people talking about how the romance doesn't work. Like because to me, like, well, it's always worked. It's always, it's very like I feel it's like, I mean, they never really date or anything. It's more played, I think, like a almost like a kind of a maybe almost like a fairy tale romance, but I think they completely sell it. Like there are all those beats about how, like there's at one point where Trinity, I think, brings Neo dinner, and finds him asleep, and I think she maybe kind of tucks him in or something, like, and then leaves his room, and like Cypher is there, and he's kind of all jealous and everything. And obviously, the ending where they basically they do something akin to Sleeping Beauty or Snow White, and it's a moment that I feel like is it's completely sincere, and it's a very fairy tale like thing, but it completely works. Like they kind of I think both the actors really sell that, like from scene to scene and how they interact, and I think though there's definitely more on Trinity's part. Like you kind of see more of her perspective on this whole thing, and her sort of, I think, maybe like it's like the romance is more told from her perspective, less so from Neo's.
Oh, you're definitely right about Trinity and like how she's actually the kind of focal point here, because I think that it's something that really is a lot more colored through rewatches, because at that point you realize like, okay, so that's what she has been sort of been that's how she's been motivated throughout the entire movie. That's what the
Mm.
Oracle told her. So all of her actions, all of her interactions with Neo come from this predicated like conception that he is like the one for her. So that kind of flavors like um what she says to him, how she says it to him, and it's something that you really appreciate, and something that you really like sort of get a better understanding for, um like on your second, third, fourth rewatch. Like there's a wealth of emotion coming from Trinity, something that's more reserved, of course, because like that's how the character is. That's how the character is sort of built up, like reserved, more kind of stoic. But I think that Carrie Ann Moss does a great job at showing like just these very minute moments of like vulnerability and intimacy, that really kind of makes it work. That's what works for me. I love that kind of romance. I'm a bit of a romance nut. I love romantic movies. I like rom-coms, rom-joms, all that kind of stuff. And I think that always like this a really fine line you have to take where something is just blunt enough to be charming, and I think that that's something that Carrie Ann Moss knows how to do, and that's something that the Wachowskis knew how to write, because they write some of the most blunt ass dialogue of all time. Um, and and again, the Sleeping Beauty thing, that is a very overt, very obvious visual, and like I can't help but love that. Like that is, it's so fairy tale esque, and like sometimes it needs to be a fairy tale. What do you think, AJ?
I think I bought the romance more on later viewings. Maybe when I got a bit older and I started viewing it through Trinity, through the lens of Trinity, because, and I guess this goes to what you all are really saying. It's she does all the work on the romance aspect in the first film. You don't really buy it looking through Neo's eyes at it. And I mean, I can get it, right? He's been told, hey, I'm this supposed savior of humanity, right? Romance is probably the last thing on his mind. Trinity definitely sells it for me, and you realize it more and more when she gives the revelation at the end that the Oracle has told her, that the man that she loved would be the one, and because she loves Neo, he has to be it, and that kind of sets about his resurrection at the end of the first film. So I buy it more then, and then like you said, the little things, the tucking him in, bringing him food at night, the I think she's one of the first one he sees when he's waking up from the Matrix the first time. So little stuff like that really sells it. But yeah, I didn't feel it a ton from his end in the first film.
I mean, I guess like all I would have to add to that is that, I love the fairy tale stuff myself. I just felt like it's like one of those moments that I guess could come off as very, corny or whatever. But, to me, it's just it works like kind of perfectly in the movie. It's like one of those kind of movie magic sort of moments that you kind of buy into it entirely.
Hey, Ro, you here? Ro, you guys can see him there, right?
Yeah, I see a blank. I see a black
Yeah, black
rectangle.
rectangle.
Like, let me hide him and show him again. All right, he's setting something up. All right. All right. So yeah, I wanted to get back to what you guys were saying, especially AJ, where like it's her like really kind of her belief, like she's like the one I love has to be the one, all that kind of stuff, and I think that really ties into what a lot of the Matrix is about, especially the sequels where it's all about like your innate perception of things, like and you can totally think of it at you can totally think of it as Trinity always having this had this inherent attraction to Neo, and the fact that she like so desperately wants him to become the one is what makes him it. Like it's not something that is inherent to him, but it's her emotional connection to him that sort of sets it in motion. Like there is no spoon, that kind of thing. Where it's like
Right.
it's like the belief that like if I love him, he must be the one that makes him the one. Like it's and like we were talking about this off camera, but like the idea that anyone could have become the one, it's not something that.
I mean, I think it's kind of a good question. Does Neo actually become the one because Trinity believes in him, so strongly? Like that, in a way, goes to that power of faith and how maybe he wouldn't have become the one unless she actually, loved him and. Like that's like the thing. Was it something that would have happened by itself, or is it really just, is it like really her belief in him that ultimately brings that about? And I mean, I've been seeing just watching some of the trailers and clips like from the new movie. I'm kind of wondering if that's actually something that they're going to play with in Matrix 4. Because you have I think there's a moment where Neo is now talking about how she believed in me. Maybe it's time I believe in her, or something like that.
Yeah, and I definitely hope that's it, because that's out of everything with Resurrections, I um out of anything, that's something that I think and I really hope that they like build off of. That's something I'm really excited to see, and I don't really understand like why would it would make a sequel where they're brought back if that's not the cornerstone. But Ro, are you finally all set? Yeah. So we've
Can you
talked
guys
about the
hear me?
Matrix, the first one. You guys want to jump in with your thoughts on it? I'm gonna say hi first to Steph. So glad you made it, and also to Aki, um, and longtime listener, and I appreciate that you made it too. Glad to have you around. But yeah, Ro, any thoughts on the first movie?
All
What's
right.
your first viewing?
First viewing. I saw this on VHS. I didn't get a chance to see it in theaters. I had a cousin who came to the States, and she's the one who really got me hip to a lot of movies that I pretty much was not allowed to see as a kid. She brought The Matrix over, and it ended up becoming a family movie for us. Like my mom, somebody who doesn't really like violence and rated R movies, she got sucked into it. Same goes for my sister as well. Um, and again, I was just blown away. Like it was a pretty simple but cool story, and this was the first time I seen something like that. And obviously, man, the fight scenes were crazy. Like the whole entire hood was mimicking those fight scenes, man. Like the Matrix, Matrix, Matrix. So like that was a thing I grew up with a lot. It was kind of like a pop culture sensation, for me growing up. Um, And yeah, it's a movie that I've watched thousands and thousands of times as a kid, and then I kind of stopped, and I haven't watched it for like a good 15 or so.
Awesome. So
That movie, this movie aged well. It
it did.
aged really well.
There's no doubt about that. So we were talking about just a couple of things, like mainly like as a story that was really tight. And you mentioned the action. Do you think there's any difference? Just to catch you up, do you think there's any difference between how the action was sort of implemented here, like, and how it was used here, than it is like in modern blockbusters?
Uh, that's a tough question. Um, I'd say yeah. Like I think it. I'll take that back. It depends on the time. I think for its time, the action scenes were pretty solid. They were pretty tight, and as Hollywood progressed, I think those types of action scenes and fight scenes progressed. And I'm pretty sure the Matrix influenced a lot of fight scenes, especially during that time too, because again, it was just such like this revolutionary thing. But yeah, that's a tough one to answer. I don't know if I have an answer for that one.
All right. So before we move on, we also were talking about like the big thing, which is the kind of romance between Neo and Trinity. Like, did that something? I know you watched these like really recently. Is that something that you think worked? I know I've always heard like a lot of criticism that Neo is bland. It's bland romance. It feels like they need to be together, so they didn't really write anything. What were your thoughts on those?
The first movie the first movie was kind of like it felt like the generic, guy, girl, and they end up falling in love at the end. Like it felt pretty generic, but it worked. Um, as for the second and third movie, I don't know because I guess you can say with the second movie, their love is what kind of brought Trinity back. His love for her is what really inspired him, to go in, take the bullet out, and like really elevate his powers. Um, but as for the third movie, I mean, I know we have a while before we get to it, but they were barely in the movie like so much that I don't they weren't even a thing. So the little that we got, I kind of forgot that was an aspect of the movie. I'll be honest with you.
Really?
Um, yeah, no, I really I was just watching it like 20 minutes ago. I forgot these two were in the movie like that. Seriously.
To be fair,
But
the movie does have a lot going on.
yeah, but yeah, it worked in the first movie. I guess it worked in the second movie, third movie. Yeah, they were just non-existent, so I can't even say nothing on that.
We're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. I know
Yeah.
that Mikhail has probably a lot of thoughts on that. But last question about this before we move on to the second movie. Was Cypher right? AJ,
What was that again?
was Cypher right?
Was Cypher right? Um, Good question. In the scheme of things, I don't know if I can ever say that he was right. I can definitely see where he's coming from and his desire to just, forget all of the horribleness that surrounds them. I don't know if I can go so deep as to say he was right, though.
All right. How about you, Mikhail? Do you agree with
Uh,
Cypher?
I mean, could you clarify a little bit? When you ask like, was Cipher right? But in terms of like what? Because Cipher, I think he has a lot of, he
Oh,
has like a lot of points.
in terms of, well, just whatever, in general, like, do you think that he was either right about like Morpheus and like the entire sort of um clandestine nature of like how he was recruited, how he recruits all these people,
Hmm.
or in terms of like whether Zion is actually worth it in comparison to the Matrix? Pick your poison, honestly.
Uh, I mean, I think that's a complicated question because, and this might just be me, but I'm kind of influenced, I think, by some of the stuff that I read that was cut from the movie, and
Mm.
so I think like in the movie proper, Cypher is arguably, I don't think he's necessarily like completely wrong because as he says, like, there's that brilliant scene with him and Smith where he talks about how ignorance is bliss and how, he kind of felt like Morpheus, ultimately, like he manipulated all of them, because, and in a way, part of that is true. Like Morpheus, in the scene where he reveals the truth of the nature of reality to Neo, where he shows him the dream world, and everything. He only really tells him the truth after after Neo takes the red pill. He doesn't say before that, well, look, before we go any further, you should know this whole world is the Matrix. This whole world is a virtual reality. It is fake. It is a lie. And maybe you don't believe me now, but you will if you take this pill. Like, I can actually take you out of this world, and you won't be able to come back. He doesn't say any of that. So, that's a level of, so there's some manipulation there, like in the way that he presents this whole thing. It's like he's like a good salesman in a way. He leaves out crucial bits of information, about the Matrix from Neo, in that scene. And then later, and I think kind of like Cypher resents him for that, but at the same time, like, all of his actions are ultimately, well, they're very selfish. I mean, he basically decides to betray everybody. He's like Judas, basically. Like, he sells Morpheus out, and because he wants to go back. And like, I think like they kind of sell why they do that, but it's still kind of presented as very, like, as a very selfish act. Now, in the final shooting script, and as far as I know, this material was shot but cut from the movie. There was actually more to what Cypher was doing, and he actually revealed to Neo that, like, Morpheus had recruited like 5 other guys before Neo told them that they were the one, and then they all died fighting an agent. And so he's kind of really afraid that Morpheus is going to eventually like get them all killed, and he kind of actually feels kind of guilty, I think, over having gotten all those other innocent people killed. And, like, I mean, I've read some interviews with Joe Pantoliano, and he actually still uses that, like, stuff that was established in that scene, which was cut. Like, he talks about it like it's Cypher's motivation. He thinks, like, Morpheus got all these other guys, like, killed, and so he can't be trusted. And so I think, like, were that material in the movie, I think I would be more inclined to think that Cypher was right, whereas I think in the movie as it is, I don't think he was, like, right, but I also don't think he was necessarily, he was like completely wrong, if that makes any sense.
Oh, totally. Now, before I go on to Ro, I just want to mention one thing about what you were saying about, like, the original idea was that there was 5 more before Neo, and this. I wish that was in the movie, even though it would have made the sequels impossible. But my favorite Easter egg, based on that revelation, is this one. Is during the chase scene at the end, where he runs through the old woman's apartment. There's a TV with showing an episode of The Prisoner. Now, the main character of The Prisoner is infamously dubbed only as being number 6. And so, Neo being the 6th one. And the final episode of The Prisoner, spoiler alert, if you've never seen The Prisoner, you learn that all the people in The Prisoner are ranked on, like, their numbers, and the leader of the prisoner village colony is the number 1, but you never see who it is. And in the final episode, it turns out that number 6 has been number 1 all along. And so I thought that was a really great Easter egg and gag.
Yeah.
Like, and it goes by like in 1 second. Like, that's why this image is like kind of blurry, because it really just pans by. If you don't know what The Prisoner is, you would never understand what this guy is wearing, and it wouldn't even cross your mind. So I really enjoyed that. Always makes you laugh. But Ro, what do you think? Cypher, yes or no?
I see the reasoning. I don't agree with how you went about it. Case in point, dude was a dick.
He was, but he was a dick that led to my favorite scenes. Go on.
No, it's like I'm not a big fan of how he sold out Morpheus and how he killed. Was it the guy's name was Tank, right? The very first one, right?
Tank,
yeah. So that part still to this day like pisses me off so bad, because I did like that character a lot. But yeah, I get the reasoning. I do get that. But no, like, there's so many other ways you could have gone about it.
Yeah. So like
but the stakes and puts. Mhm.
hmm? No, no. Sorry, you're buzzing in and out. You
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Can you guys hear
yeah.
me now?
Yes.
You're fading in and out. But yeah, my favorite scene in the movie, before we move on to the second one, is when Cypher like doing this whole gloating, saying like, "Oh, it would take a miracle to stop me," and and like I always love cuts in movies where like there's two conversations going on, but it only happens with the cuts. Like the answer is like. I'm alive. Like I don't believe it. like that kind of thing. Like I love it. Because it's that pinpointed bluntness of like the Wachowski writing. That's just charming. I can't help but love it. But on that note, let's move on to the first sequel, The Matrix Reloaded, in its awful cover, its awful, its
It is
awful
terrible.
poster. Um, uh, okay, let's go down the road. Let's just kind of like start from base point. Now, Ro, since you were here, you got here late last time. First first reading the movie and overall impressions since then.
Looks Reloaded. Uh, I enjoyed this one, but as I've finished rewatching it recently, I started noticing, the cracks in that armor. Where the Matrix was pretty balanced in terms of, just like setting up the story and giving us, the history, of the Zions, machines, and all that. Um, I felt like there was a little bit too much action going on here to the point where it kind of distracted. Now, I get it. The action scenes are amazing, but I felt like it felt like a straight up action flick, whereas the first one, it felt like a nice balance. Like, that's not to say the first movie wasn't an action flick, but I liked the balance of, talking, history, and then action, whereas Reloaded, it just felt like just straight up action. And there were a lot of parts that I did enjoy, and that park scene is probably one of my favorites. Just with all the Agent Smith just like coming out left and right, and he gets on the pole and just does that little spin thing. That shit will be forever goated, man, forever goated. Um, but yeah, I had a good time with it, but I think it's the pacing really that bothered me a lot.
Definitely. I totally agree. And I didn't watch this until way later, like even way later than I watched the original movie. Um, and I watched this at the same time as Revolutions, and I think that really colored my perception of both movies at the time. But
Mm,
Figure Loaded, I agree with a lot of your points. I thought it was very like bogged down, very overstuffed, and it felt like it kind of droned on. I do think the action scenes are very well choreographed, and this is something that me and Mikhail talked about off camera. But I think that they're just excessive. Like we were talking about this the first movie, how the first movie has this kind of really pragmatic use of its action scenes. It builds up to them. It doesn't use them a lot. This one, it feels like they need an action scene every like 10 minutes, but probably
mm.
not 10 minutes. It's a long movie anyway, but so it's probably longer in between. But it feels like they're like, okay, now there needs to be an action scene, and then now there needs to be an action scene. It's that really kind of cyclical thing, and like there's a couple action scenes I don't think really need to be in this movie. You could have cut out a lot, and I think maybe like it's either like maybe a little bit of hubris. Maybe they felt like with the first one being the success it was, being as critically and like just acclaimed as it was by a large community of fans, they maybe they got a little bit too big for their britches, and they really went all out, and they did that classic sequel thing where they doubled down on what people liked rather than progressing what worked. What about you, Mikhail?
Well, I mean, I definitely agree with most of what you're saying, and my feeling is that I would say, when I first saw Matrix Reloaded, I was just kind of like, I was like, oh my God, what is this? How did this happen? This is terrible, And now I'm kind of like, well, I don't hate it, but I can say without mincing words that I think the film as a whole is an incoherent mess. Because and really, I feel the problem mostly to me is with all the stuff that happens within the Matrix. Like, I think the stuff that happens in the real world that kind of works, even though it's kind of separated from the events of the third movie by a bit too much. Like, because Reloaded mostly does take place in the Matrix, although I think a good chunk of its first like 40 minutes or so, they take place in Zion, and then Zion kind of falls falls to the side for a while. But it's just to me, like, a lot of the plotting, like a lot of the stuff that goes on in the Matrix feels like filler. Like, it doesn't really, like, there isn't really a true a real story that is being told. And I mean, there are different ideas, but it's like they never really figured out like what story they wanted to actually tell in the Matrix, so they kind of kept putting different ideas there, and without like ever working out like how they fit together. Like, so I think like the real world stuff, well, there's a story happening there, but there really isn't a story happening within within the Matrix itself. And because of that, like, those two things, they kind of coexist in the same movie, like the real world story and the Matrix story, and they really just don't come together. And that's, I think, true for Revolutions like as well. But Revolutions, in my mind, is a better film because it mostly focuses on the like on the Zion War, and a lot of the stuff that's there really works.
All right, Jay, you're up.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely an incoherent film. Um, it felt like this was a film that the studio, like you said, wanted to double down on things that people came out of the first one talking about. The action. So it felt like the studio was constantly sending back notes. Hey, can we get an action scene here? Can we get an action scene here? And I think it at times bogs the film down. Like, they're done well, but I really felt like we could have used a tighter story here. I agree, with the notion that all of the stuff in Zion, it's really good. It gives great world building, but it just doesn't feel like it fits with what this film is trying to do, at least. So you guys pretty much hit on all the points that I was going to make. The action is great. It just doesn't feel like it necessarily works in this film anyway. There's too much of it, I'd say. It gets weighed down by it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Totally. Now, I think a lot of that might have been that they probably wanted to make an extra long film, and then when they had to make like a trilogy, there's that whole anecdote. I'm not quite sure how much basis in truth it is. That they were meant to be just a one sequel that was split into two, and that became like Reloaded and Revolutions. And I feel like it's kind of like what happened in Game of Thrones, those book series. I mean, they were talking about Ice and Fire when there was one large sequel that they couldn't really parse down, so they split into two books, and one book focuses heavily on one half of the storyline, and the second book focuses on the second half of the storyline, despite them really just progressing it as much as they can, but not really too much. And I think like this is a similar situation where, like you said, this is focused a lot more on the Matrix side, but in order to keep that like a full movie, at least by Matrix standards, they have to like really add in so much more padding. While Revolutions is focused a lot on the Zion stuff, and the Matrix stuff is just like tying up the loose ends, basically. Like Zion stuff is like a full actual, we're seeing more of the character arcs, we're seeing more of the plot beats sort of actually have more development and payoff. And the Matrix stuff is really just like, we gotta sort out the mess from Reloaded, and which is I think emblematic of like maybe they didn't know how to parse this story down narratively, because that's not something you would see when a movie is shot back to back like this, Like you would have gotten
these
more
shot back to back.
Yeah, they came out the same year.
Oh, okay. I forgot about that. Okay.
So like it's really weird, and I think that it shows that narratively they were biting off more than they could chew, and they probably knew it while writing. But I don't hate Reloaded. It's definitely the weakest of the three. Now I have to ask this question, elephant out of the room. Zion orgy scene. Do we need it?
Yes.
It was hot.
Yeah, it's fine. I don't know if you ever truly need an orgy scene, but it doesn't. I don't think it harms anything by having it in there.
Um,
Yeah.
Sorry, I guess I wanted to say that I don't know if it's strictly necessary, but it is. I mean, I know like a lot of people hated that stuff, when the movies came out, and in hindsight, I mean, um, I don't think it's it's like bad, but I don't like I honestly I think I don't like the music in it. I think the techno beat there was maybe the wrong musical choice, but I don't think it's but I don't like think it should not be in the movie necessarily.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that in a better structured movie, this scene wouldn't even be on anyone's radar. But I think it's really weighed down by just how badly parsed the movie is, and how weirdly paced, and in terms of like where it wants to do, in terms of character, emotional beats, and actual plot relevant scenes, that it sticks out more of a sore thumb. But what I like about it is that Morpheus' speech is really good, and the scene as a whole has this emotional tinge to it that is very classically Wachowski. I mentioned this in a video I made about how sometimes like movies that become cult classics are like only appreciated later because at the time they're so definitively uh, a creator's vision. And I think with the Wachowskis, like this is just something that only they would find entertaining, and only a select amount of people who are also on that same kind of like entertainment personality wheel would find entertaining. And it took me a while. It took me a while. Like from like 12 to like just like 3 years ago, I did not like this scene, and like a couple years ago, I rewatched this series. I'm like, yeah, no, this is really fun, weird but fun.
Yeah, it took me by surprise when I saw it the first time, like as a kid. Again, I had no business watching this. Um, but as I watched it again recently, I feel like it fits because again, it's everybody's celebrating, it's the celebratory mood. And I mean, let's be honest, if you go to certain parties, man, hey, this is what they're doing. So I guess this was like a nice way to, you know, I guess show off like that side of design culture. So that's why I guess I appreciated it more. And it was kind of like a happier time, for Zion because after that, things pretty much went to shit. So I'm glad we at least had like that nice little balance. Well, I shouldn't say balance. At least we have that contrast.
Yeah, no, totally agreed. So just move on to like another separate part of Reloaded that has some contention. Now Smith comes back. He was completely destroyed at the end of the first one. Now I know Mikhail has a lot of thoughts on this, so why don't you take the lead here?
Thank you. Yeah, so, I really feel Agent Smith does not belong in this movie, honestly. And like one of the biggest problems that I have, coming back from, like you watch the ending of the first film, and, Neo becomes the one. He basically becomes God, and he just he doesn't even have to fight Smith anymore. He just kind of like does a one arm thing, like one hand thing for show, and then he jumps into Smith, and he blows him up. He literally just obliterates his code. Smith like Smith's pieces are like all over. They're like gone, and even the agents are now afraid. They kind of run away. And then in the second movie, Smith kind of comes back with no real explanation. I mean, he kind of provides an sort of an explanation, but then he kind of hand waves it away. He's like, "Well, it's irrelevant how I came back. I'm just here." And then and that's kind of like I mean, a lot of people complain about like Palpatine's return in like Star Wars Episode 9, and here I'm kind of like always thinking, well, wait a minute, like nobody, it's strange, nobody complains about how Agent Smith kind of returns with no explanation, no real idea of like, well, like how, when did he reform, how did he reform, like why did he wait until now to come back, like we don't see his code like coming back and reconstituting itself, and how did he figure out like how to duplicate himself, kind of like a virus. And then the weird thing is, of course, to me is like Neo fights Smith again, but even though there's this acknowledgement that like Neo destroyed Smith before, like we never see him in the second movie ever use that ability to blow up agents again. Like, I mean, so he keeps just fighting. I mean, it's kind of like, well, wait a minute, why doesn't he just like jump inside Smith, blow him up from the inside again, and why doesn't he do that to all of his copies or something? Like, I mean, but so he just keeps fighting the guy like kung fu style, like endlessly. Like there is no, and there's like no real, and there's no real progression there because none of the Smiths are dying. None of them are, you know, like none of them are flying apart into code or anything. It's just, you know, there's more and more of them, and then, you know, he just like flies away, and to me that's kind of like, well, that doesn't make any sense, like given what we've seen in the first movie, and they even acknowledge that Smith was destroyed, but here it's kind of like, well, why can't Neo just, you know, destroy him again like that? So that to me is like one of the first real, you know, like that's like one of the big holes in the movie. And it really, like, you know, Smith, I mean, he keeps showing up almost like he's kind of like a plot device. You never really know like what he's doing or why in the second movie. Really, I mean, he keeps giving different explanations for, like, you know, well, I want the purpose, you know, or I want what you want, or I want everything, you know. So there's like no real consistency there, and that to me is just like, well, you know, I mean, I'm kind of like, wait a minute, how did he get to that whole building like later anyway? Like, I mean, how did he know that Neo would be there, or how did he know to come there, to be there at that exact time? But I guess that, you know, that's like another thing that doesn't make sense. And then it's like, you know, in the first movie, you always kind of knew what Smith was doing on a scene by scene basis. You knew that, you know, oh, well, he's doing his job, he's pursuing, like, you know, he's enforcing authority, you know. Then you find out, well, no, he's after Morpheus. You find out he's after the codes to Zion. That's why he's after Morpheus. And then you also find out that he has a personal motivation for what he does, because he hates the Matrix and he wants to be free. And I feel like that's one thing that's really problematic about, you know, the second film as a whole, is that, like, you never really have any idea of what Smith wants in the scenes that he appears in. Like, they kind of don't really, you know, so it's also, to me, it's like that makes it almost impossible to follow.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think we talked about this before, where it makes the first movie and these two sequels feel like separate movies, like separate series, because like Smith from the first movie isn't the same thing as Smith from the sequels, and Smith from the sequels, I think, makes sense more as it goes along. I think by Revolutions, they understand more about what they want to do with Smith, and I think Smith Revolutions is like a really interesting and really sort of palpable antagonist. But in Reloaded, they don't know what to do. It's really like a weird midpoint where, like, we have to find a way to get there. And it feels like it's a first draft of ideas that Revolutions like actively is a second draft of, you know. It feels like they're making up on the fly, and Revolution's like, okay, we got the ideas down. Okay, well, it's too late. The first part's ready in post-production, and we can't go back and fix that story anymore. And I think what really hurts this is like I said, the fight scenes, the way the fight scenes are parsed out. Like, I think the way Smith is introduced is really good. He's like shadowy, enigmatic, mysterious. He's like, I got set free. That's all we need to know. That could have been his entire scene, his entire purpose in this sequel, in Reloaded. And we could have never seen him again, and it would have been fine. Like, you get the ominous, like, you know, he's changed. Like, it's cliche, like, oh, like they clashed and something happened. You don't need, even if they never explained it. I think that would have been far better than trying to explain it weirdly, you know. And then we get like 5 minutes after that, it's the Burley Brawl, the 100 Smith Brawl. Like, there's no progression there. And I mean that like more emotional progression, because like, oh, what's going on with Smith? Oh, that's going on with Smith. Like, you get the answer almost immediately. And then you don't see him again for the rest of the movie. And like, oh, like something that, you know, you could have parsed out. You could have seen maybe him reform. You could have seen that enigmatic mystery scene. You could have seen like maybe one or two Smiths as it goes along, and then like, oh, it's a real problem. This is something that maybe they can't contain, and that's where you kind of go off into revolutions, you know. But it feels like they had a lot of ideas and they didn't know how to structure them into like a purposeful narrative. What do you guys think, AJ, Ro?
Yeah, for
No,
me, it
um,
felt
no, go ahead, AJ.
yeah, okay. It just felt like, I guess by the time they got to the second film, they felt like, hey, we want Neo to have a foil, so like let's turn him, from this agent who was, terrorizing our protagonist in the first film to almost like let's make him an anti Neo. And like I can see what they were going for, but I don't know. Maybe I feel like he should have been just saved totally for the third film at all, or like Elvis was alluding to, maybe just having a background presence in the and Reloaded, and just not use him for just your cool fight scene for a second, and then like you say, never see him again. So I I don't Smith's one of the things I struggle with in Reloaded, probably more than anything else other than the just overuse of action in that film. It felt a bit unnecessary, and I think he probably could have been better utilized in the third, and it would have just been more impactful had you saved him for that film. But that's pretty much all I have on Smith, at least in this film, anyway.
Yeah. I kind of feel the same way because even though I do have my problems with the movie, like at least then, like Smith was gelled in a pretty cohesive way. Like it made sense. But by the second movie, it's just like, okay, I'm following what's going on. I'm like, oh wait, what the fuck? Why is he here? Like that's what I got doing here. And then after a while, you kind of just like, okay, whatever. You kind of just get used to him, or you get used to the idea of him being around, because it's like, okay, if this is what we're gonna do, we're just gonna shove him in here. All right, I'm gonna expect him now. But yeah, like if they left him alone, or yeah, if he was just something in the background or something lingering, cool. And then in the third movie where we get that pretty epic fight scene, that would have worked. These movies and you don't really care for the story, and you see him popping up, you're like, oh shit, this is cool. Another great fight scene. But again, if you're somebody who cares about these stories and you care about plot and how things move, yeah, this is really weird. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any kind of salvaging the disconnect between the first and these two, but the connection between Reloaded to Revolutions is still so surprisingly frayed that could have been fixed way down the line, and it's shocking that it wasn't.
I mean, I think that's a great point. I kind of, like I feel that it's weird how even though they were shooting these two films back to back, that there are still these weird contradictions and gaps, between them. And and the portrayal of Smith and the how and why of Smith being one of them. I mean, it's I do suspect though that it was arguably one of the reasons for that might have been that there was simply like the Wachowskis as writers and directors, they kind of overextended themselves because they I think they worked on the script of the first movie for maybe 4 to 5 years. The scripts for the second and third one were made, I think, in less than 2 years. In addition to, I think like a 200-page script for the Enter the Matrix game, and also like some of the other comic book and other transmedia stuff. So it was just kind of like you're kind of stretching yourself too thin, and that affects the end result.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because like with Into the Matrix and all that, there was this direct effort to like have a multimedia narrative that kind of fed into each other. I'm not quite sure how much that worked. I mean, I never played Into the Matrix, and I never felt the need to. Like, I I hear like there's a lot of important stuff there, but I don't think that there's anything that really impacted like the narrative of the films, like especially by Revolutions. It seems like anything that would have been there wouldn't have like paid off in the in the final film anyway. So like I never felt like the capacity of that. Like maybe if they had like just streamlined it, focused it, and just kind of like really been more like pinpointing of like their plot, that could have helped a lot more too. But let's move on to like the stuff about Revolution, about Reloaded. I think was really awesome. I'm not quite sure what Mikhail thinks about this. We had a bit of a chat about that. Got a little bit heated, but let's talk about the architect. No, okay, so this is one of the more contentious scenes. It got parodied relentlessly. It was called one of the worst scenes of all time so many times. The nadir of the series. I want to hear AJ's thoughts. What do you think of the architect scene? Like, just in terms of like how you think it feels. Like, do you think it's entertaining? How do you think it like impacts the story? Did you like how it impacts the story?
Well, first off, this is the greatest evil version of Colonel Sanders we could ever get anywhere. But no, like the first time I saw this film, I just remember being confused, right? Like, so I was like, okay, wait, you mean they've done this before? They're going to do it again? Wait, we're giving him the choice now to save one woman or to, it was so confusing. Probably not even the first time, probably the first few times. I've gotten to the point where I don't know, like Reloaded, it's kind of one of my least. It probably is my least favorite of the trilogy, but I just I don't know how I ever truly feel about the architect, because when you tell me this whole thing is, basically the simulation you've been running over and over and over and over again, and Neo's not even, he's the one, but yet there have been so many of him before. I'm like, okay, I guess it just feels like everything is almost predetermined of what's going to happen here. But it has a certain sinister vibe to it on rewatches as I'm older. But I don't know if it ever really works for me, other than the fact that to give Neo an impossible choice. I don't know if it works further than that.
How about you, Ro?
I don't know. I honestly have nothing for this guy. Again, this is the second time. This is my second time like rewatching the movie, and this was one of the things that I kind of just forgot about. Again, I think as I rewatched this movie more and more, I may understand it. But I don't know. I have nothing here for this guy. I don't want to like try to come up with something out my ass. But yeah, I have nothing here.
All right. Good point. I think like it's really it's an obtuse scene. It's a really obtuse scene. It's something where I think that they really were biting off more than they could chew with this scene, and it asks a lot for what I think. I love the scene, but it asks a lot for what is very simplistic. But Mikhail, you take it. I'm gonna say my thoughts for later.
I kind of I think I've rewatched the, like, I don't, I don't like the architect scene. I mean, I kind of understand what it's, at least I think I understand what its intention is. It's kind of a way to crystallize the reframing of Neo. Like, Neo isn't a god. Here's the real god of the Matrix. Neo is more of like a, rebellious angel kind of figure. He's like Lucifer or something. And, if you follow the logic that like God knows everything, Lucifer's rebellion was always part of the, it was always like foreseen. It was always part of the plan. But like, I really, I mean, I've been poring over every single line of dialogue in this scene for, for quite a while. And honestly, it's like, I still can't really, make any sense of how, I'm not really sure. What does the architect want, and what do the machines actually want? And like, why do they want that? Like, I mean, so, they destroy Zion, but then they want to rebuild Zion. But it's like,
okay, let me jump in, because I know that you got frazzled before.
Yeah,
I love this scene. I love the scene. I think it's the best scene in the entire trilogy. Just in terms of like what the character motivations are and like how the character kind of interplay is. And what works about the architect, I think, is that he is probably like one of the best representations for what's for what the movies, the sequels are trying to say about how programs direct, how they work, and how they and the sapience and sentience that they have further than what Zion might believe they do. With the architect, he is a petty ass piece of shit. He is a douchebag, and the thing is, like no, he's such an asshole, and it's perfectly played because the way they write it in such like an analytical way. They write his dialogue in such like a stark, like technical, like completely like obtuse way. But it's every line, every word choice, only in service of just of how it's trying to obfuscate that he is like this narcissistic, egomaniacal, like self-serving, like dickhead. And stuff like where he talks about like how he created the Matrix and like, oh, like I did this and I did that. I made something so perfect, so smart. Oh, but yeah, like I guess this other program helped. She helped. If you had to say I was the father, and she's the mother, and like it's overloaded with so much like the thesaurus, idea terminology. Like it's just overloaded with so much like pointless redundancy words. Like you could have, this entire speech could have been like 3 lines. Uh, um but like it reveals so much character though. And I think what the sequels really try to show is like the exiles programs, they have personality, they have character within themselves. They're not just like point and click like the agents are. And that Smith himself, like, I think what really works in Revolutions is that he is like stuck between like being the most basic. I think agents are very, very much the most basic kind of program, and then these higher kind of program like bodies that are able to gain some sort of free will and some sort of consciousness, like the architect. And I think what I was saying yesterday when we were kind of going over this with Mikhail, is that the architect and the scene with him and Neo, it shows Neo at his most program-like. This is where he figures out that he's not really like an embodiment of all things human, where he figures out he's just an utter extension of the program design. He is himself a machine of some sort. So that's why he's like the most stoic. Like he's just like talking like, "What do you mean? This is a system within systems." Like no emotion, because he is a program, he's a machine. And meanwhile, this guy who's machine is like, "You're kind of dumb, Neo," or like, "You're smarter than I thought, Neo," or "You think the Oracle is real, dumbass?" like these are things he's saying. He's saying them really like over the top, but this is literally what the dialogue is. Like humans are too stupid to understand perfection, that kind of thing. And like I love the scene. I think that it's a really great thesis statement for what the movie is trying to do, what the movies are trying to do. But I understand like it is a big heavy ask after like 2.5 hours of like boring action. Like the movie, I think it would have been a lot better if the movie had been less focused on the giant action set pieces, because I think that by the time you get to this, you are bored, and this doesn't help you get any less bored. It's a great punchline in a better structured movie that this wasn't.
Can I just ask like one thing?
Yeah.
Like, what the architect mentions like at the end of his whole spiel, and also, I mean, I think the performance is actually kind of brilliant. Because it is like like you have to the actor has to say so much dialogue. But I think like my biggest question about this whole thing was that at the end of the his speech, he says like failure to you have to return to the source, and failure to comply will result like in the destruction of the Matrix, in a cataclysmic system crash. I think he describes it, that will kill everyone connected to the Matrix. And so I'm kind of like, wait a minute, why is that supposed to happen? Like, does anybody have any take on that?
I think he means like more in the long term, because it's hard to understand. Really, what their perception of things are. Now when I think Keanu Reeves like made a point of saying like, or someone made a point of saying, I heard it somewhere, is like this scene, it takes like a couple of minutes, but it in the actual reality of the movie, it happens like in just a second. So it's hard to understand like what their perception of time really is, and like how they kind of like parse it down. Now without the system of the one being in place, it's definitely more along the lines that eventually, without any kind of like the one to like be like the funnel that we can like kind of force like non-compliers into, to like eradicate them, to like separate them, to like to make sure that they're quarantined. Basically, Zion is like a big quarantine zone, a firewall for like these people that just can't exist in the Matrix. Eventually, things will break down. That's what that was happening with like what they perceive to be the paradise and nightmare matrices before they created the system of the one. And like eventually, yeah, they lost whole fields. People need the illusion of choice, and Neo gives them that illusion of choice by existing.
Hello?
Elvis?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was saying Neo gives them that illusion of choice by existing.
Okay, but basically, does that mean that Neo's, like, if Neo does not return to the source, does that mean his very presence will eventually lead to the cataclysmic system crash that will kill everyone? Or is it more like the architect says, if you don't return, we will be the ones to destroy the Matrix? Because, like, Neo's like, well, you can't do that, you won't. So I'm kind of like...
I think either or. I think with the architect, a lot of what he's saying is because he is trying to emotionally manipulate Neo. Like that's why like they're like, the ones are like inherently chosen because they love humanity a lot, and then it just shows like every like normal people are just doing whatever they want. Like a baby's on the screen taking a shower, or it's old woman's crossing the street. Like it's very much like them trying to like manipulate Neo what they think he like wants. Like he loves humanity, but he doesn't love humanity per se. He loves Trinity. So like they kind of got on the wrong wheel there, and I think like with the architect, there's a lot that he might be saying that isn't exactly truthful. Like exactly like when I was mentioning how he downplays the Oracle's role. Like he's definitely not something. He's definitely as a machine. He's not something that is just telling the truth all the time. He could be a big fat liar.
Although I will say the impression I kind of got after seeing both films recently is that I don't think like the architect ever really lies. Like he seems to, in fact, like at the end of the movie, he has at the end of Revolutions, he has that whole conversation with the Oracle, and he seems to be kind of almost insulted that she thinks he would lie. He's like, like, what do you think I am, human? Of course they will be freed or something.
Yeah, but like that's also like again that's because he's egotistical. He's like oh yeah, of course I wouldn't, but like that's also like a character personality trait. So it shows that if he has capacity to be offended, he has the capacity to lie.
Okay, that's a fair point.
But I love the scene, and I wish it was a better movie. It makes the movie for me. Like I watch this movie again and again in anticipation for this scene. Like that's what I watched the movie for. I think it's such a great payoff. I think it's such a great twist on things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the series could have continued without it, and it really makes the Matrix special. I think where like the first movie is like this very simple but very effectively told movie, and this is the scene that really like makes this a very interesting movie to dissect. Like okay, like in terms of character associations, in terms of character dynamics, in terms like their emotional states. Like how do you go on from here? How does it affect Neo moving on? How does it affect Zion moving on? Like, it opens up such a breadth of like ideas.
No, I can understand that. In a way, kind of like it kind of like expands the lore, if that makes sense. So it kind of like adds another element to the lore. Like, sure, it could have, sure, in a better movie, this would have been received well. But like, as I'm listening to this conversation, it seems like there's a lot of benefit here because again, when you finish that first movie, you're like, holy shit, Neo's God, Neo's the one. But then you realize, hey, there's somebody else beyond Neo who could possibly be pulling the string. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah.
All right. So before we move on to the revolutions, I guess it'd be easier to talk about this now. You can talk about like you said, it opens up the lore of the Matrix. So let's talk about like the the most hilarious lore of the Matrix. These vampire dudes and their werewolf buddies and the
Oh
ghosts.
God.
Um, so, I know. Just to give background. Now, the architect created the Paradise Matrix, Garden of Eden allegory Matrix, and then humans were like did not like perfectly happiness, but who knows how machines like calculated happiness. And then he made the Nightmare Matrix, which was a horror filled, very Jupiter's ascending kind of world. Myths are real, vampires are real, werewolves are real, ghosts are real, and that's what these exiles are. And so, like, what are your guys' takes on those, man? AJ.
Again, confusing. Like this. I mean, bro, it gives you some cool scenes, but I don't know, man. It felt like that could have been something that could use another Passover on the script. Like, hey, let's maybe refine this idea a little bit. What the guy's name? The
Merovingian.
Thank you. Yes, that entire concept. It felt like somebody was entirely stoned when it was written, and just a few more passes could have gotten it to be something, where it's passable. I'll say that much.
How about you, Ro? What do you think about these guys? Do you think they were used well, or is it an interesting idea?
I mean, they provided some of some of the more entertaining fight scenes and action scenes. So, I mean, in that regard, sure. And that's all I just use. To me, they're just props for action. That's it. That's it. I don't think of them as anything more. Like it's kind of just like your henchman in like a TV show. Just like, hey, we're just gonna. I need a crew of, minions. That's what I thought of them as. That's it. That's all I think of them.
I gotta agree. I think it's an interesting concept, but other than like the ghost twins, they don't use them that much. Like we get told like that guy was a werewolf, but like he never showed any signs like of that, and only the ghosts are like a really good version of that idea because like they're hard to kill and they're like just they are. I don't think they even die. They don't really beat them. They just kind of get away from them.
I want to add that actually, it's interesting. Like, I agree with the notion that the idea is interesting, although they never really explore it that much. Like, like I think Persephone says, like, well, you need silver bullets to kill them, but then Neo doesn't, like, he just kind of like fights them and, kills them the good old fashioned way. But, you actually, if you look at the two henchmen, one of whom Persephone shoots, as I recall, they actually have like teeth. Like, they have these more like either like maybe wolf-like or maybe vampire-like teeth, like in that scene. And I definitely know that the game, I mean, I've seen a playthrough of Enter the Matrix, and they actually have like they kind of expand on that a little bit in there. And I think like Niobe has to fight like actual like vampire minions and everything, and you have to find stakes and you have to stake them and stuff like that. So I kind of like wonder if maybe the idea here was like this was more like one of the ways in which like they were gonna promote the game more like, oh, like, yeah, like, look, we have vampires and werewolves and stuff, and you can fight them in the game.
That makes complete sense. That makes too much sense. I hope they're in Resurrections. I hope they're in Resurrection. Merovingian's back, so give me my like zombie apocalypse or whatever, right? All right, give me some of that. But yeah, I think is there anything else to talk about with Revolution Reloaded before we move on? I think there's one other thing. Let me see if I got a picture of it before we move on to Revolutions. Because I think we've exhausted like the well of like Reloaded so far. I think a lot of the interesting stuff that Reloaded does carries on to Revolutions anyway. Backdoors and like other programs, like good programs like Seraph here. You think that's an interesting thing, like just showing like the programming side of the Matrix, that whole world?
Sorry, you go ahead.
Yes, I do. I do agree with that aspect because it's just expanding on what you think from the first movie. Like again, if these were better paced movies, again, I'd appreciate these more, but still for what it is, just like the general premise. Yes, I do appreciate like that. These are programs that are taking the forms of humans, and they have very distinct functions, things that they're supposed to do, and I definitely dig that. So again, as I watched these movies more and more, that's definitely something I've grown to appreciate.
I guess I think it's a fascinating idea, but to me it kind of raised some questions because I was a little again I was kind of confused by like I mean they call it programmer access, and like Neo asks like Seraph, are you a programmer? But I'm kind of like wondering, well, wait, what exactly is a programmer? Is that like an AI or that's like supposed to somehow manage the function of these doors?
Or
And
I think we get that from Ramakandra. Saudi's parents were like they're it's machines making machines. So it could have been just like, are you like a programmer in the sense that are you a program, are you a machine that manages the matrix on like a programmer level?
I mean, I guess that would make sense, but then it's also, like, I mean, in the first movie, I remember, like, the agents were literally described as, like, the people, the guys, like, they have all the keys, they have, like, like, all the doors are there. So I'm like, wait, so do the agents ever use these doors, like, at all? Or, like, what's their relation to that place?
No, I totally agree, and it makes it. I think again, it's one of the reasons why there's such a disconnect between the original and the sequels, and that the original, like, the deja vu happens when they change something. Like, so who's in charge of changing something? Is it programs like Seraph or like the architect? Is it like and then like the Oracle and the Reloaded says every time you think you see a ghost, that's a program that you saw out of the corner of your eye. Like, but like, how does that work in the like? In the first movie, it's very much like machines point and click. It's like one machine consciousness. And in Reloading Revolution, it's like no, they definitely had the idea like let's have a whole ecosystem of like artificial beings that are genuine beings in their own right, and like those two things can't coexist, But so that's why there's such like a contrast. I enjoy the idea though. What about you, AJ?
Same. Interesting concept. Gives us more good lore building of this world. But yeah, I 100% agree that it doesn't fit with what was set up in the previous film. And like I said before, with it's something that could have used a few more passovers to make everything mesh with what they had set up in this world before. But it's an interesting enough concept for me.
All right. Let's move on to what I think is the best sequel, the best movie in the franchise, my favorite at least. Matrix Revolutions came out the same year, filmed back to back, and is somehow like an actual sequel to the Matrix, I think. Okay, so first impressions, first viewings, general thoughts. AJ, you go.
This was a Superman movie. But no, I like it.
Yes. Agreed.
Agent Smith was Doomsday. We all know it.
What's that?
Agent Smith was Doomsday.
Yeah,
General Zod.
All of them, honestly. BBS. General Zod was Doomsday.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's true.
But yeah, no, I had a good time with it, much more than Reloaded. I don't know if I'll say it's my favorite one out of the trilogy, but I give this movie a lot more credit than I think most of the general public does.
Okay, how about you, Ro?
I literally just finished watching this. Where do I go with this movie?
10 out of 10.
Remember I was talking about that balance? Yeah. Elvis, if this was any other episode, I'd agree with you when you say 10 out of 10. But this one, brother, I'm sorry. I can't rock with you on here, bro. Here's my problem with this movie. Remember I was talking about balance? The balance was where Matrix Reloaded, like I thought they could have did a lot better balancing the action with, the story. I feel like here the balance with the Zion stuff and everything else that was happening in the Matrix, like that balance was just bad. It wasn't working for me. And like I said before, I had forgotten um Neo and Trinity were in the movie. Like I had forgotten there was that whole other aspect because they spent so much time on Zion. Like that whole thing with the machines. Like I do get it, and it is cool because we really do get to see more of Zion, and we really do get to see them really hold their own against the machines. And I think that's fine, but I think we spent too much time on that. Like again, it got to the point where I was just like, "Yo, am I watching The Matrix? Like what's happening here? Like what happened to the main characters? Like it felt like a tie-in movie more than an actual movie, if that makes sense. Like it just wasn't working for me. But I appreciate what they're trying to do. But if I'm forgetting about the main characters after a while, I'm like, something's going on here. That's not okay. But I do appreciate the fight scene at the end because that was beautiful. Like I'm not gonna lie, for a second I did think I was watching Man of Steel. Like I wouldn't be surprised if the Man of Steel fight was inspired by this.
It has so many parallels, especially because they can, they're jumping through between buildings and into
Yeah.
buildings, all that kind of stuff. And then like the pit in the ground, it feels like Man of Steel, BBS. It feels like all of that, honestly.
And I have one more thing to add. I have one more thing to add. Trinity dying pissed me the fuck off.
Did it?
That pissed me off so much.
Okay, go off.
No, because you made this whole thing about her dying and the visions in the second movie, only for her to fucking die for real in the third movie.
Because it was
what
poetic.
The fuck? No, it was
It was
not.
poetic.
Oh my, no.
Because you can't escape fate. They had that extra time together. Don't you understand?
Oh, bullshit.
It's a Greek
bullshit.
tragedy. It's a Greek tragedy. Have you ever read Antigone? I mean, come on, it's classics. The classics.
Sounds like some mid after this.
No, I totally agree with you. It's very repetitive. I think it shows its weight a bit. With like how this is clearly one story split into different movies, and like they didn't know like how to wrap that up emotionally. They had the idea for Trinity dying, but like they wanted to use that as emotional payoff, but they couldn't figure out emotional payoff to the second movie, so they did it twice. And I think it works here, but it does feel like we're going through the same motions again. But I love Revolutions. I love it. I think the balance works. I posted up this picture of Kid and Mifune.
Best relationship in the movie.
Best plot. Like, okay, when I first watched the movie, I thought the kid was boring.
Yes.
I thought he was annoying. But like now, I'm in this mood where like I enjoy characters that start out annoying that just like man the fuck up at the end. I love that I love character arcs like that. Like Avatar: Last Airbender and Sokka. This is a Sokka type character. That kind of thing. And I love it. I think that like it shows the humanity a lot more than like any orgy scene can do. Like it's just, you show like just like the hardness of it, the coriness of it. But it feels like feels so light until it gets really dark. You see like the shenanigans of the kid. Like oh yeah, like yeah, when Mifune is like, you should have told me you were 16 and I would have believed you.
Yeah, there's that great point where he's like, I never finished my training. And Mifune's like, neither did I.
Yeah, it shows us how they connect and like how simple and how like disastrous life can be, like in this kind of war-torn kind of world where you just have to make the conscious decision, the conscious determinism for yourself. Like you have to choose to be this person that you have to be. And when the kid does that at the end, like where he's like he makes that final shot, like hell yeah, I don't care how annoying he was or how annoying the characters find him, he's boss, like he did it. But I love that stuff, and with the balance, like the fight stuff, the plot stuff, and like the two storylines going on. I agree that Neo and Trinity aren't in it as much, and it'd be hard to remember that they are. What I like is that Reloaded kind of got through a lot of the stuff already, so for them, Revolutions is nothing but payoff. You know, like okay, we got through all the stuff we needed to do and reloaded. So now every scene with Trinity and Neo is like, okay, we got it. Okay, every one of these scenes works. They emotionally and character wise, they developed enough. So like I'm invested in every scene that they're in. When they made the decision when Trinity tries to go save him from the train man, and she doesn't take no for an answer in Club Hell or whatever it's called, where the American is the BDSM club they're in, that kind of stuff. Like she's like on a she's as stoic as she can be. This is like the most like roaring rampage she can get, you know, like she's like I'm going to do this, like he's stuck somewhere, I'm going to save him and all that stuff. And when they're on the ship, when they decide to like kind of like abandon and go like abandon everyone else and just kind of go to the machine city, like the back and forth there, the dynamic has never been better for me. Like I am totally invested in their relationship, and when she dies, like that's such a great moment, and I think I like it. I like how tragic it is that he did save her and now he can't, and it's like it shows like how limited he is. And I think that's something that Reloaded like struggles with, because we expect for the end of Matrix that he is like, you know, a godlike force, and Reloaded like we have to show that he's a godlike force here, in a limited way to make fight scenes interesting, but it makes fight scenes less interesting, makes fight scenes boring because he's never in any real danger during them. Meanwhile, here he's mostly in the human world, and it shows like yes, he for as powerful he can be in the Matrix, in the real world he can still get hurt, and it's there's a lot more viscerality there. Like the fight scenes in the real world between him and Bane, the human Smith, that goes hard. That goes hard. That is like they get cut up in ways that like you don't really see in the sequel. Like look at Neo there. That's like we were talking before during the Burley Brawl, during like the 100 Smith Brawl. They just like a bunch of like pushes, very Power Rangers-y, you know.
No damage, no bleeding, no, you know, like no actual injury, no suffering or
and
anything.
then here you get a lot more of that, like that visceral, like gory-ish kind of thing. Like yeah, no, it's powerful. It makes an impact, and I love Revolutions. I think that all of it is awesome. But how about you, Mikhail? You haven't gone yet.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I remember I didn't think much of Revolutions after, you know, the very first time I saw it, and then I think like over the years it kind of grew on me for one reason or another, and it was really with the most recent rewatch that I did just earlier this week that like, you know, what really dawned on me is that like, oh wait a minute, no, the Zion stuff is what really clicks. You know, like the Zion story legitimately works. It's the most coherent story, the most emotionally, you know, resonant story. And I think actually that's kind of like why I viewed Revolutions to be like the better sequel, because it focuses mostly on Zion, and that's the story that works. And I definitely agree with the idea that, like, you know, it's kind of what's really problematic though is that, you know, they've kind of had to isolate the main characters like from that, because they were really like in this almost completely separate in the Matrix storyline, and it's only like, you know, and then they kind of start folding them back into that, like, you know, even Neo's trip to the Machine City, that's still I still count that part as part of the, you know, saving Zion story, but like but I guess like that's kind of like the main issue is that like the Zion story works, but it doesn't really feature the main characters that much in it. Like, you know, you have to, it's mostly carried by all of these like new characters like Locke and Mifune and the kid and like Link's wife, I think Z was her name. So, you know, so I feel like in a way it's like it that makes it kind of harder to invest than it should be in it, I guess. You know, but I also love, like, you know, I love the return of the more visceral like action, and the fact that now, you know, the fights have real consequences and everything. So it's everything in the Matrix that still doesn't work for me, like with all the, you know, I mean, I think the final fight is really kind of lame, to be honest. I mean, no real choreography there, in my opinion. But like you know, but yeah, like the Bane stuff, I think that was a great scene actually. In the movie, because now it's like, you know, now it's like Neo's in real danger, and Smith as Bane finally kind of, you know, they actually interact now, like they have real character conflict there.
Yeah, it's like you said, like again, I love how it shows like that Neo doesn't have all the cards, and it makes every one of his decisions a lot more have a lot more weight to them because these are decisions that can actually be life or death. In the Matrix, like he doesn't really matter that much. Like he can be in the moment, but now he has to weigh every single step, like against like what could possibly happen. Like even going to Machine City, he's doing that on faith, but it's something that like could have gone horribly wrong, and he could have died, and he almost does. And I love that again. I love how like they're separated too. I love that there's separation because at least at that moment where like they're like Neo did it. I don't know how, but he did it. Like I love that because they'll never know how he did it. You know, I guess now in Resurrections they probably might. Who knows? Because we see Niobe back. But if they never know how he did it, it just adds that extra layer of like tragedy, like to not to like to have like to have no one know what your ultimate fate is, like to be not remembered that way is, I think, kind of like bittersweet.
I guess I just want to maybe add one bit though, is that like like the Matrix Online game, like that was kind of sort of supposed to be canon, like at the time, and in that I think it was established that like the characters do know that like Neo is dead, that he sacrificed himself for the deal, and like I think like the initial plot there was that like I think Morpheus tried to recover Neo's body from the machines. Because like he knew that Neo's remains were still, for some reason, like the machine still had Neo's remains, but they didn't like destroy them or something. So I think like there it was established that they knew, but it's no longer clear whether or not the game is going to be canon. So
I saw something on the timeline when the first Revolutions trailer came out. They somebody threw a theory out there that the reason why the Morpheus that we know is not is not in the movies because I think in the video game the Smiths killed him.
No, an assassin program killed him.
Yeah, he got assassinated by
an assassin program.
Oh, okay.
Which I think would be pretty funny. I would love it because like I think there's a lot of ideas in the game. Now I've seen all the cutscenes to the game, and I wasn't old enough to play it at the time. Like I didn't have like the equipment there, but I think that there's a lot of ideas that were really interesting. I don't like how gimmicky and how toyetic like the factions idea were. Like, oh, here are the Cypherites, and here are like the blue pills and all that kind of stuff. Like it feels too like gamey, like that's obviously stuff that was made there to be a game, but there's stuff that I thought was really interesting, like the brewing machine civil war, and I think Revolutions definitely sets up like there's definitely inner conflict. Like Architect and Oracle, they don't like each other at all. Architect really doesn't, and machines and programs are smuggling themselves into the Matrix. We see that with Sati and her parents. Like, yeah, we're programs, but our child can't live in this environment, so we have this. So there's internal strife in what humans initially believed to be just like a single consciousness, and I think that was really interesting idea that the game kind of developed, and hopefully Resurrections follows through on. But I posted a picture of the source, which is like the machine hive mind, and I just think that like all that stuff is beautiful. Like he's blind. Again, that's what I mean. Like it's a Greek kind of thing where like you have to become blinded to see, like a blind prophet, like a blind seer. Like that's Homer. That's like Virgil. That's like old Greek myth. I love it. I think that's great. It adds this layer of mythicness to Revolutions, and I think that's what I really jive with, like the mythic, grand scale nature of everything. It's the best New Gods movie of all time. Just some Jack Kirby stuff. I swear. The source.
Was it actually ever confirmed though that because I think like they refer in the credits to this being as the Deus Ex Machina? And
the machine god is the Deus Ex Machina, but I mean more like the yellow orange pathways that he sees. That is the source. Like the connective power through every machine. That's the source. Deus Ex Machina is the machine god that he talks to. Yes, though.
So that's like the physical. So Deus Ex Machina is like the physical form, but that energy that like Neo sees, that's like the source itself. But like, isn't it supposed to be like a mainframe or something? Because I always like thought, well, that seems to be more like like maybe like the network of the thing.
Yeah, I think that Revolutions came out at a weird time where like they didn't there wasn't that much knowledge about like how like like wireless connectivity would work. You see the same thing in like Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines. They do the same thing with like Skynet, where they don't know whether Skynet should have been like a mainframe or it should have been like a wireless network. And they do that kind of thing, like the characters don't know either. And I think that was just something in the technological like buzzwords that were kind of floating around. I think it works either way, honestly, but I think that as time has gone on, the network idea is a lot more relevant and has stayed relevant. Like
Yep.
everyone understands more about like how Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, like the cloud, how that kind of like still is around. And I think thinking of it that way, it keeps it like more timely. It's a timelier way to think about it.
Agreed.
So what else? What else is there to say before we move on to just general thoughts about Resurrections? Let me see. Um, Let me see. No, I think we got through most of everything. Other than, I guess we can rank them. AJ, rank these.
Oof.
Okay. I'll go Matrix, Resolutions, and Reloaded.
All right. I hopefully have a common theme here. How about you, Mikhail?
I would say The Matrix, the Animatrix, Revolutions, then Reloaded.
All right, Euro.
All right, Matrix. Sorry. Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
All right.
Again, you got give me a couple more rewatches. Maybe it'll change.
All right. I guess it's I'm the odd man out here. I'm gonna go Revolutions. All right, Revolutions. Matrix, and then Reloaded. Just main trilogy stuff. I want to like Reloaded more than I do, and there's stuff that I think is the best everything, but like the movie is just so much fat. There's the antithesis of both these other movies, which I think are very like lively experiences to watch. Like Revolutions, it's long, but it's all hit. Like Trayman stuff is really fun. The Bane fight is really fun. The Battle of Zion is awesome, and I think the Death of Trinity and like the dramatic catharsis of that, and the Neo's like, there's nothing else to do but this, is like so potent. I love it. I love it a lot. Action wise, I think that the first one is still the best. How about you guys?
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I gotta go with number 2, man. I gotta go with Reloaded. I loved the action of Reloaded. I loved it. Probably even better than the first one. I'm sorry. I'll be the odd man out here.
All right. No problem. No harm done. Now aesthetically, these are all okay. So the second two definitely have more of like a style to them than the first. Do you wish they had kept more of like the same style from the first, or do you like the style that the tone and atmosphere and visual sense that the second two had? AJ.
I'll go with the visuals in the sequels. I guess it maybe made it a little more distinct, especially the real world stuff, like the Zion stuff and all of that. So yeah, I'm surprisingly gonna go with the sequels there as opposed to the original.
How about you, Ro?
Definitely the sequels. Definitely. Again, it's just more expanding. Like again, the first movie was very bare bones. You didn't really get much there. Well, what you got was what you got, but again, it's really in the second and third movies like where you really get to see them expand on that. So I'm going for the sequels all the way.
Awesome. I agree. I think that there's a lot of stuff in the sequels that is a lot more iconic to the Matrix to me. But I think that the first one, I wish they had kept some more of that kind of visceral grittiness that Reloaded really doesn't have, and Revolutions only brings back near the end. You know, Like there's just more of a tangibility to like the world in the first that the second and third just kind of are lackluster with. How about you, Mikhail?
I definitely, yeah, I agree with what you are saying, and I would go with well, I mean, I would say I go with the first film in terms of, aesthetic and style. I think it probably has the best, most, I think it has the most consistent tone, you know. I think like the second film in particularly bothered me with its weird tonal shifts, which I don't think were, um, like I don't think there was any real transition there into some of the more cartoonish stuff. And although I will say that I actually kind of appreciate the more greenish, I guess, hue of the second and third films, because the first movie was surprisingly light on the green like tint or bias or whatever they call it, whereas the coloring overall of the second and third films, that I think was more that kind of established the style, the overall look of the Matrix a bit more.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'm really glad the remasters gave everything a nice compromise. Like there is still a noticeable tinge for the first movie that in the new remaster where like it's obviously green, but it's not as green as it had been, which was I think a mistake, something that they tried to correct. Um, and in the sequels, they line up a bit, which I think helps give a nice consistency, a nice congruity between the series. And I really enjoy. I think they're like okay, good. It's subtle enough to be like under the current, but it's still overt. You'll get you want it to be noticeable. Like you don't want it to be like you don't want to like be too nuanced or too subtle, which I think would go against the Wachowskis themselves. Um, but yeah, no, I really enjoyed that as well. But let's move on to Resurrections, and we can just kind of like wrap this up. We've been talking for almost 2 hours. Resurrections. Okay, comes out in 2 days, man. AJ, are you excited? What do you want to see, AJ?
My biggest thing. Okay, they explain, how Morpheus is back because unlike Neo and Trinity, well, Trinity's been brought back a few times. Morpheus is his death occurs off screen. I wouldn't be surprised if a ton of people don't even know that he's dead. So I really want to see how they explain how he's back, how he's younger. Then I have a theory about they might be transitioning to Neo and Trinity both being the one. I want to see if that ends up being right or if I'm just totally out in left field. But yeah, those are the two things I'm probably most interested about.
Or how about you, Mikhail?
My main hope is that the film makes sense. I mean, really, my one of my biggest gripes is like the portrayal of yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, but the second movie made no sense at all to me, at least inside the
Hmm.
Matrix. And one thing that and the trailers really give me hope because now there's definitely more consistency in terms of how they portray Neo's powers. Um, because like I mean, Neo was I'm sorry, but he was an omnipotent god at the end of the first movie. Then the second movie kind of downgrades him to a guy who maybe has telekinesis but doesn't really use it. Uh, and then I see the trailers for this movie, and it's like, oh no, wait a minute! Now he's using his telekinesis offensively. He's actually creating shields and deflecting rockets and stuff. So I can already see that it feels like more like it feels like a story is indeed and is being told, and there is logical consistency there. And everything that I've read suggests that indeed the film works. So I'm hoping that it works as a whole on in terms of story and storytelling.
Yes, definitely, definitely. I agree with all of that. How about you, Ro? What do you want to see?
Um, all I want to see is something cohesive. That's all I care about at the end of the day. I want something that flows. I want something that's well paced. Again, I felt the first movie that was one of the highlights of it. That's why it got such praise. I want to see a I want to see a nice balance of action and story. Again, I'd really like to see how they handle the Morpheus thing because that is interesting. And again, there's a lot of people who haven't played those games. There's a lot of people who don't know he's dead. So that's something I'm really gonna be looking out for. But all I'm looking for at the end of the day is a good movie. Like that. That's it. Like so, if this is gonna be a new launching pad for, another what is it? Another 3 movie saga. Cool. Let's set that up, and we'll take it from there, man. But I'm going in with low expectations. A lot of the times with these reboots and these continuations, they're not the best. But the Matrix is it's a lot of this is a love child for so many people. So I only hope they do right by it.
Definitely. On my own end, one of the things that's always been worrying me, that we've heard that's gonna be a funnier movie. This is gonna be like a meta movie. It's gonna be like a commentary on the franchise. And like, okay, if that's gonna be it, I hope it's funny. I hope it's not like a bunch of lame ass jokes, because like
Mm,
because they're saying that's gonna be more comedic. Like it's gonna be a lot more like self aware. Like, okay, hope it's self aware in a way that doesn't bog it down, that isn't embarrassing. I hope it's not embarrassing. Like the people behind this have worked on like Cloud Atlas, which is I think the Wachowski's like magnum opus. It's like I love it. I think it's like the most majestical movie. It's mythic in the way that the Matrix is, but it also has like a lot of overt corny heart. And it drips with like sentimentality and emotion, and I feel like I want to see that in the Matrix context. Um, like I'm giving up all hope that it's gonna go back to that kind of visceral, gritty feel. But if it's not gonna do that, hopefully it has a lot of like corny heart that works. That again that just isn't like lackluster or undercooked and embarrassed. I don't want to be like watching this. I want to be like, okay, that's funny. And have you guys like seen the playthroughs to like the demo video game?
no.
Yeah, I
Um,
just watched that today. Matter of fact.
I think a lot of the humor and a lot of like the kind of like jokes in it, I think like that's in the right direction. If the movie is more like that, I'm okay.
Yeah.
That's good with me. I just don't want to see anything like anything to like lowest common denominator, like low hanging fruit shit.
I really loved like the joke about marketing and how it's like, oh yeah, the marketing people didn't want all the philosophical mumbo jumbo, so we have to do
Yeah,
an action scene.
yeah. Like I heard like in like industry where they're saying like there's gonna be like commentary about like what people want in a Matrix a sequel, and like that feels like that could be like dialogue ripped straight from the movie. And if again if it's something like that, then yes, more of that, please. Like it's good, it's good. Because I think the Wachowskis can be really funny. Like I think that they have a great amount of humor in their movies. Even the Matrix, all of them, there's a lot of humor in them. Um, so I'm up for that. And again, the movie looks very plasticine. It looks very again, like I know Mikhail was talking about how Neo has more of like his overt like godlike powers, but like it still feels very cartoony and like okay, I can live with that. That was most of Reloaded. That was most of Revolutions. But if it's going to go that route, I hope it's a lot more balanced tonally. If it's going to be funny, hope it's funny. If it's going to have heart, hope it has heart.
Yeah, definitely, it's like because the heart and sincerity and like real emotion and stuff. And I mean, I think like some of the clips that have been from it, I think they really, it really is going to have the heart. I'm pretty sure of it.
Oh, I'm glad. So fingers crossed. But overall, can't wait. We'll we'll have to see what happens. Um, HBO Max, here we come.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess we can wrap up. So, Mikhail, where can they find you?
I am on Twitter. I'm at MLS532. I also have a Substack account. I call it textualvariations.com. You can also if you go to Medium, you can also find me there.
Awesome. All right. How about you, AJ?
You can find me weekly on the Comics Authority podcast and on Twitter at Mr. underscore Mitchell underscore the number 2 underscore the letter U. I'm there as always giving hot takes.
Awesome. K Ro, round it out.
You can find me on Twitter, Roll of a Queen _ You can find me on YouTube, Roll of a Queen Reviews, Instagram, Roll of a Queen _ Medium, Roll of a Queen Reviews. Yeah, just talking comics, pretty feet. What else? And yeah, man, just regular life shit. Oh,
Awesome.
also, again, you can find us on Comics Code Authority
Yeah,
Weekly.
I was going to mention that too. Yes, as always, you can find me on this channel on Source Wall Radio. I do a bunch of unboxings, some small retrospectives, some small deep dives, and of course on Comics Code Authority with my co-hosts and cohorts, AJ and Ro, weekly. And we're having some really fun episodes coming out soon, so check them out. And I'm gonna put all this stuff below when we get off the stream, all the links. So please check them out. You won't regret it one bit. Anyway, thank you, whoever listened. Let me know your thoughts on these movies below. And if you do see resurrections, hope you come back and let us know what you thought. Um, so we are out. Say bye, folks.
Peace.
We're
Bye.
out.
All right.